The precision bass and the jazz bass. Two classic basses, both created by Fender. Both that have set a musical standard that is unparalleled. Two designs that began the electric bass as we know it, and that knockoff companies have copied over hundreds of times, sometimes successfully, and sometimes not so successfully. Nonetheless, the original Fender models ring out as truth as America's and the world's preferred bass guitars. Recreations, updates, and all. What holds true today in the modern climate is getting as close to the original Fender jazz bass and Fender precision bass designs as possible. Vintage is the key word today. When I first started playing bass, I didn't know that there was a difference between these two basses much at all, other than playability. But I'm here to tell you today that after years of study and after years of being a bassist and being in music professionally, I can tell you that these two basses, though they look similar at a glance, couldn't be more different in terms of sound, tone, playability, and build. So in this short video, we're going to discuss a little bit of history and exactly what makes these two basses, the Fender Precision Bass and the Fender Jazz Bass, uniquely different. I'm Daniel Childs, or Rumblin Man as I'm known on the web. I decided to make this video because this is an issue that absolutely needs to be discussed. In 1951, Fender issued the original P-Bass. It was arguably the first ever electric bass guitar, whereas going from the typical upright standard, prototype was drawn up in 1950 and then modified and released in 51 as the original electric bass guitar, Fender Precision Bass. Now the original design is somewhat different from the one you see today. In fact, the original design was made somewhat to mirror a Fender Telecaster guitar and have a similar body shape to that, but to be a 4-string bass guitar. Obviously a little longer, being somewhere around 34 to 35 inches in length as far as the neck goes. Later in the 1950s, around 1957 and 1958, the design of the P-Bass was completely revisited. It had originally had one pickup, which was a single coil pickup. In the late 50s, what they did was they changed that. They made it into a split coil pickup. So it's still almost as if it's a single coil pickup, but it's split for a fatter tone, better receiving. Also, the body shape was completely revisited and redesigned to look more like a Stratocaster guitar, but obviously bigger and being a bass guitar. This set the standard for what is now the precision bass, and as of 1968, the original design was re-released and named it was named the Telecaster bass. And but today, though, reissues that mimic the original 50s design will usually carry the name, 50s reissue. There are also some great Fender reissue basses of the later 50s model. There's a road-worn one and a non-road-worn one. And essentially what we're seeing in the 1950s, we're seeing this bass be created, and then in the late 1950s we're seeing a total makeover that is still the standard today. And then through the 60s and 70s there were some trends like the thumb rest and whatnot, but what has always stayed true is the pickups, the split coil, and the shape of the bass. The pickguard is going to have that curve to it, and you can know a P-Bass when you see it. And also, as far as modern playing goes, it is still the standard. In fact, I know a lot of the key bass players in today's music world, and I'm telling you, in popular music, the P-Bass is still the dominant bass guitar. It's gone through modifications over the years, but in the modern music world, what's popular is the vintage model of the 60s and sometimes of the 50s. In 1960, Fender came out with its second bass model. It was initially called the Deluxe model, and it was actually made to be similar to the Jazzmaster guitar. However, through some modifications and a redesigned neck, in 1961, we saw it being called the Jazz Bass because Fender created this bass hoping it would mainly appeal toward jazz players because of its neck shape and because of some versatility. As of 1961, it had 3 knobs on it. The 3 knobs are, for instance, there are 2 different pickups on this bass, which is the first difference we see, and there's a volume knob for each one of them, and then there's a tone knob. Those are the 3 knobs, and the Jazz Bass really changed things in terms of the neck being slimmer, more easy to get around, a nice narrowing design, and it really revolutionized several types of music, and it's a bass guitar that stays prevalent today. You know, the tone is going to be a lot different than the P-Bass, and the original word that Fender used to describe it was bright. And today, it's the dominant bass guitar in most genres, such as like funk, disco, reggae, blues, heavy metal, jazz fusion, and slap bass, because what you're going to get is with that brightness that comes from those 2 pickups, you're going to get better sounds for slap, a little bit more definition. I kind of refer to the jazz bass as kind of a sword, because whereas it seems that the P-Bass is punch, the jazz bass is a cut. And for musicians that want their bass guitar to sound like it's coming through a little more in the overall mix, the jazz bass was then and is now still a very obvious choice. Let's talk about tone and physique, what makes these basses play and sound as they are. Here's a P-Bass. This is actually a Squier rendition, classic vibe series, but an excellent bass at that, and it is made to closely mirror the original 1960s designs, whereas we did see in the 1960s some new designs come about. Now, what makes it unique? What makes it special? Well, just as we mentioned earlier, this split coil pickup. I like to generally refer to the P-Bass as having a great punch to it. You know, there are all kinds of in modern today's music, there's preamps and effects and everything, but a P-Bass by itself, preamp or no preamp, just a passive P-Bass just has a special kick to it that really kicks into the mix, really gels with the drums. Also, body shapes we're going to see that are very defining of this bass are this pickguard design. You'll know a P-Bass because of this curvy pickguard design. I actually changed the pickguard on this one. And also the neck is going to be different than the jazz bass because the neck is going to be more thick. It doesn't necessarily get really narrow as you go down. It's going to stay pretty thick, and some would say that it's harder to get around, but others would say that the P-Bass is a man's instrument. It is a bass that has a legacy because today it still delivers. In fact, this is my primary bass right now, believe it or not. And it cost me less than $400, I believe. In fact, recently I played on a rock album. I played this bass on every track except I played the jazz bass on 1 track. You're definitely going to get a different tone and a different playing experience out of a P-Bass than you will of a jazz bass. All right, let's talk about the jazz bass. The body's going to look different. Whereas in the P-Bass, the pickguard's going to come down to here. You're going to see your tonal knobs right here. Also, like we mentioned, 2 pickups. Each has a control knob for its own volume. So if you want, you can just hear this pickup, or just this pickup, or both blended together, or any combination of blending you can do with these 2 knobs. And also, just like we do in the P-Bass, whereas the P-Bass has the volume knob and the tone knob, the jazz bass has a tone knob as well. And this tone knob all the way up, you can get some great slap sounds. It really is an awesome bass. And the neck is going to be thinner. It's going to be more narrow. It's going to slim down as you go to where, right here, look what I can do. I can do this. I can do it with my pinky. Put my fingers around that. And it's a jazz bass is generally more guitar player friendly. For a guitar player that's switching over to bass, the feel is going to be easier for a guitar player to get used to playing. The sound's going to be bright. It's going to be like a sword that cuts through the mix, whereas the P bass is like a kick that kicks into the mix. Nonetheless, it is a versatile instrument. I mean, having these two pickups, the original jazz bass that had, or the original bass that had a different kind of pickup, was the jazz bass, where you could switch off between these two pickups. I mean, they're still very similar pickups to the original Fender P bass design, but they are different in their own right, and they sound different in their own right. And being able to switch off between these two, you're going to get a different sound in the neck than you are in the bridge. And this bass really adds some diversity into your arsenal, and is just a long-standing favorite of a lot of bass players today. And it's a bass that you're never going to see go away. It's been modified over the years, but like I mentioned, the modern thing, this is the American standard Fender jazz bass. The modern thing is to get as closest to the original thing as we can, and have the greatest sound and playing experience that we can. I have heard it said that if you pick a P bass or a jazz bass, either one, you can't go wrong. I personally disagree. These basses couldn't be more different in tone. I mean, and you know what? Let's plug them up, and I'm not going to really label exactly what's going down. I'm just going to plug them up and play a little bit just to give you a basic idea. But the best thing you can do is go to your local music store, go to your Guitar Center, or if you've got one of those Best Buys with a music store in it or whatever, go to your local music store, spend about an hour, plug up the P bass, play it, get used to the tone, you know. Use this tone knob, see what you like best. Pick up a jazz bass, mess with it, and see what bass is right for you. Honestly, you're going to notice playability difference. You're going to notice difference in body shape. You're going to notice difference in the tone. And the thing is that neither one of these is necessarily the answer for all bass guitar players. They're friendly to different genres. Quite frankly, if you want to do some slapping and you want that highly defined sound, the P bass is probably not going to be the bass for you, because it's going to have that steady, rock-solid kick sound. You're going to want a more articulate sound like the jazz bass. Or let's say you want to be in rock and you want to use a pick or fingers or whatever, and you want to really just drive home a thumpy bass sound. The jazz bass is going to be a little bit too bright for you. You're going to want the P bass.